Welcome to the Get Smart Group and Blue Wind Marketing. This is our second webinar of a series focused on the big picture of running a business, selling to customers. We're pretty focused on the backyard recreation industry, but these concepts can really apply to any business, any manufacturer who is trying to reach consumers, who's trying to sell more product in this ever-changing world of technology, marketing, and the economy that we face. So we're talking today about the customer journey, and we have been discussing this in previous lead-up conversations and felt like it would be a great topic to dive into with regards to the journey the customers expect, the journey the customers want to have, and the journey that the customers often get imposed on them. And one of the questions that I started out with Lewis last week was, what keeps the customers coming back, and how do we help people map out the customer journey for success and to retain those customers going forward? So, Lewis, you had a great response. You said step one of the customer journey is
to map it out.
yeah.
Sounds simple and obvious, but oftentimes it's just putting pen to paper and getting the team together and mapping it out, because most of the time folks have it in their head and they don't have it on paper. So starting with, hey, here's what our current situation looks like, and getting on paper is a great starting point. And I typically suggest getting multiple people involved because oftentimes the customer journey doesn't just involve one person, it involves a variety of people.
So people in your marketing department are your first touch because they're putting things
Yep.
out to bring the people in. People in your retail store, if you have a retail store, are the second touch, or the person answering the phone if the customer calls to get directions. What other people, Scott, are we involving here in this conversation potentially?
I'll get to that in a second. I want to pile on what Lewis is saying. And first off, every small business owner out there should read a book called E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Absolutely incredible book, talking about going from doing something to scaling a business and what that actually looks like, because a lot of times those processes are missed. And most small business owners realize not only are they good at doing the thing that they're selling, but they're also good at selling the thing that they do. And scaling that process is difficult. And to Lewis's point, that sales process and that onboarding process in the early days especially lives inside of the owner's head, and that's the only place it exists, because they did everything. They took the call, they did the bid, they went out to the job site, they quoted it, they drove the excavator, they drove the crane. All of the things involved in building a pool business, a lot of times it was one person doing that from start to finish. And as it moves on, it's a very different process. So in looking at who else are they going to talk to and what does that process look like, let's focus on pools for a second, because practically speaking, very few people in the world buy more than one pool in their lifetime, right? This is a one-time thing they're going to do in their life, and they're going to be evaluating what that process feels like with a number of different people. And if that onboarding process feels good, they're going to spend more and more time with you, and eventually they're just going to let everybody else go, and they're going to finish the process with you. And to give you an example of, and also not only do people only do this once in their lives, it's also very expensive. I mean, even if we're still talking about a standard fiberglass pool with 3 feet of concrete in the $50,000 to $60,000 range in some areas, most pools nowadays, especially custom pools, are well north of $100,000. So this is a lot of money. So who are they going to talk to, right? They're going to talk to the person who answers the phone. And that's not always a trained salesperson. That is sometimes someone who is busy and doesn't have time to deal with the minutia of someone who's ready to spend $100,000. Even though that sounds like a ridiculous statement, because if someone's ready to spend $100,000, you should be very, very cheery with them. And also, in the middle of the season, what does that process look like when the water care desk is 40 people deep? The retail checkout counter is 10 people deep for pool toys and floaties, and now there's someone who wants to get a pool. So by mapping it out down to that, literally, how do you answer the phone to how do you route that person to a salesperson, to how do you ensure the salesperson responds in a timely manner. All of those things need to be written down. And to Lewis's point of, it's just pen and paper, or pen and a whiteboard. Get everybody in the room and walk through it. And there are a lot of people that are going to be interacting within that process. One of the things we did a while back for a client in New York was we did a 3-minute video introduction for every single employee in the company, from frontline retail people through the designers who would design your backyard to the people who operated the machinery when they get to your backyard. And we would include those testimonials in the emails for, hey, we're going to be in your yard this week, remember? And these 3 people are going to be there. Here are their intro videos. And all of a sudden, when they get to the gate, when they knock on your front door, you already know who they are. And the entire process is that much more positive and more fluid. And that person's just going to have a great experience.
Yeah. And that brings me back to something that Lewis said when we were talking before, which is that loyalty starts in the onboarding. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Lewis?
Yeah, absolutely. So the customer experience can make or break if a sale happens or not. And so customers want a great experience. And if your customer journey is seamless, as Scott had mentioned earlier, it's a well-oiled machine, it's orchestrated very well, then they're going to be a lot more loyal and they're going to tell their friends and family about you. And the reason is because it's not like the sale is not won when they're talking to the salesperson. It's won from the beginning. And if the experience is fluid and seamless and congruent, which is not easy but simple, it'll build trust and it'll lead to people saying yes.
Mm-hmm. So the customer doesn't feel like they're having to swim upstream against the current. They feel
Exactly.
like the flow has been mapped for them. They're following the steps that they're being given. They're
Yep.
checking the boxes for themselves, which also, as a salesperson, you're helping them overcome the objections they would have had by mapping it for them. And you're leading them to where you want them to go, which is write me a check and I'll build your pool. So the trust is built in them feeling secure that you're the guide for them in that process and in that journey that they're taking.
In one of the classes I teach about the customer journey specifically, there's something, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but I'll bring it up now. There's a concept that HubSpot has developed really nicely. HubSpot is a CRM program. They call the sales flywheel instead of the sales funnel. And the sales flywheel imagines a circular pathway to getting customers. There's a traditional way of adding customers to the top of a funnel, and you qualify them, you move them forward, and out the bottom comes customers, right? A flywheel takes your customers and turns them into part of the customer and lead acquisition process. Mm-hmm. And if you think about for a second, the 5-star reviews you've left in your life, or the 5-star experiences you've had in your life, and the 1-star experiences you had in your life, you remember those things very vividly, the 5s and the 1s. How many 2, 3, and 4-star restaurants have you been to in your life that you won't even remember you were ever there? And one of the data points that I talk about is, in most cases, when it comes to a pool, over 80% of the selling has occurred before they ever contact you. Because if your neighbors, if you have a pool and your neighbors come over and they say, hey, we're thinking about getting a pool, who did you work with? If you were a 5-star company and you did a great job and the whole process was great, and to build that loyalty, they're going to remember your name. If you're a 1-star, they're also going to remember your name, but for the wrong reasons here, right? But if you're a 2, 3, or 4-star, they probably won't remember who you are. And say, I don't know, it was 10 years ago, we don't really remember who it is. Versus if you keep that top level experience from the beginning of the onboarding process to the entire thing and build that loyalty, that recommendation, oh, it was Bill's Pools down the road, they're going to take that recommendation as gold, and they're going to call Bill's Pools, and they are most likely going to work with Bill's Pools. Full stop. So creating that entire experience as part of the customer journey, it's great you did a good job, but do a good job every step of the way, from that first person who answers the phone to the last, handing over the keys moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go Lewis.
I want to also mention one of the big benefits of a customer journey map is it gets everyone on the same page, literally. It creates alignment so everyone's speaking the same language. And that's really important because then the customer feels like the process itself is absolutely frictionless. And if that's the case, then they're more likely to move forward quicker and refer you to other people.
Yeah, and having that satisfaction with the process from start to finish, but especially at the beginning and building that relationship is going to add to the customer lifetime value. So not just how many pool chemicals did they purchase from you for how many years, and did they purchase a pool vacuum? Did they purchase floaties from you and patio furniture and a hot tub and etc. But the referrals and the recommendations that they make to their network adds to that customer lifetime value. And there's a lot of value in that to be understood by everyone touching the customer from the very first day of the contact that's made. So what are some recommendations? So once we've sort of looked at the journey as a company, we sort of mapped out how we want it to go. How can we assure that our people that answer the phone are following that journey? How can we assure that the people who are selling the customer are following that journey? What are some steps people can take practically to do this for themselves?
So there has to be the customer journey map front and center. If it's hidden, if it's invisible, it's going to be out of sight and people are going to forget about it. So the key is to make it prominent. And that helps reinforce that this is the way we do things, because it's too easy to go back to your old habits and old behaviors.
Mhm.
And with a customer journey map, it's changing behavior for the better. And then the second part is to not try to fix everything overnight. It's to focus on what are we going to improve this quarter? Because if you look at it quarter by quarter, then you're going to create the constraint of we can only really do 2 to 3 things every quarter. And what that does is it takes the overwhelm out because it's only 2 to 3 things. But I always suggest with what is the 2 or 3 biggest bottlenecks?
Mm-hmm.
Because then once you prioritize those, it then helps get, as Scott mentioned earlier, the flywheel spinning quicker. So ask yourself, what are the 2 to 3 things that are preventing the flywheel from spinning quicker?
Mm.
Focus on those for the quarter, and then assess at the end of the quarter, how did it go? And if you feel good about that, wonderful, identify another 2 to 3. Or if you feel like there's more room for improvement, continue focusing on that for the next quarter.
Mm-hmm. And so we talked a little bit about some examples of things that could be the fly in the ointment, right? The bottlenecks. So one example is someone calls a 3 pool companies because they're trying to get information about a pool. There's a company that is a little complacent. They're comfortable. They've been in the market. They dominate the ads. And then there's a company that's lean and hungry. So who's going to get that lead is really determined by who calls you back first, who provides the best customer service when they do. And that is a very simple thing that you can have checklists, scripts, processes that your people that answer the phone follow every single time to ensure that the quality of that phone call is high for the leads that are coming in. And when someone fills out a form on your website, there's some pretty critical time frame there that's required for following up. What do you guys typically see that leads to success, and what do you see that leads to failure?
Let me give you 3 things that we see over and over that pertain to that very first step that, to Lewis's point, can be discussed, addressed, improved, and measured over the time period of a quarter. So one of the tools that we use is called AirCall. And AirCall is a phone management system that has amazing stats. It turns all your computers into phones. It turns your cell phones into phones that are actually your office number and a bunch of other stuff. One of our clients in the Southeast, we found out they were just not answering half of their phone calls. Now, this is a 3-store hot tub, pools, all the things store, literally not answering. And then another further third of the call. And by the way, they had an auto attendant. So you called in and it would say, press 1 for this, 2 for this, 3 for this. And once the person pressed the button to get to a human, half those were not being answered. Then another third of callers were hanging up in the auto attendant within the first 10 seconds. And so, I mean, do the math. That is an insane number of people who want to give you money who aren't giving you money because you've made it too difficult to get in touch with them. So that little piece alone showed them, and we backed out the math, hire someone to answer the phone. Yes, go spend $40,000 a year just to answer the phone, because losing half of your potential lead revenue is way more than $40,000 in net potential profit, right? So first, of the 3 things, right? First, understand what your inbound phone call metrics look like. Who's answering the phone, and think about it. 2, have a script. Make a script that every single person answers the phone the same way every single time, and every single person in the business knows what the disposition of various questions are. I want to talk to somebody about buying something. Okay, I send them to this extension. I have a question about service. Okay, I send them to this extension. But also not just, hi, I'm inquiring about a new pool. One moment, don't do that. Oh, let me connect you with one of our salespeople, and if they're not available, I'll come back and I'll get your name and number, and I'll have them call you as soon as possible, right? So that's like, what does that process look like? Not just, yep, somebody else's problem now, I transferred them, it's off of me. Nope, every single person is part of that process, and that is measurable. Again, with a tool like AirCall or CallRail, where you can record the calls, you can have your weekly staff meeting and pull up every single inbound phone call from Monday and play the first 10 seconds of every single one. And, with over the course of a quarter, people are going to start answering the phone with that script and using it on a regular basis. And then the last measurable thing, and again, this requires a CRM or some sort of system, is speed to follow up. So one of the things that happened, I mean, it's happened to us for years. Ali and I have been in hundreds of pool and spa showrooms around the country over the last 16 years doing this and watching that process. And one of the things, and this isn't the case so much anymore, but it's still there in a modified form, and it'll make sense in a second, was, okay, person goes to your website, they fill out a contact form. What happens? And the owner of the business will say, oh, I get an email. Okay, then what happens? Well, I usually forward it to a salesperson. Okay, how long does that take? Well, if it's on the weekend and I'm not in, it might take me a day or 2 to get it over to that salesperson. Or if it's after hours, I might not get it to them for 2 days because it gets buried in my email and I don't even see it's in there. Okay, deep breath, right? Deep breath. Okay. And then what happens? Well, then the salesperson follows up with them. Well, how do you know? Well, we don't. They tell us they did. Well, how many times do they follow up with that person? So the follow-up piece is a whole other conversation as part of the customer journey. But that speed piece of lead comes in, either they call in, they fill out a form on your website, they come in off of Facebook, whatever. Who is following up with that person and how quickly? The first business to follow up is over 70% more likely to close that deal than anybody else. And it can be, even if none of your salespeople are available, it can be that aforementioned front desk person, right? Hi, Mr. Smith, we got your inquiry. There's no salespeople available right now, but I'm going to get to the first person you have. I have a couple more questions I have for you. Again, part of the script. Get a little more detail. Hand that warm lead off to a salesperson. You're going to close that deal. So in that first process, that first contact of that customer journey is so critical. And those are 3 things that can be implemented, and we see not well done pretty often.
What are some other bottlenecks, Lewis, in this process that you could think of?
I just wanted to
Oh yeah, go for it.
build off the speed
Yeah.
to lead. Absolutely. That is one of the biggest levers a business can pull, because you can spend all the money in the world on marketing, but if on the back end there's a lack of alignment, there's a misalignment, there's going to be a leaky boat. And that's not what you need as a business. You need a business where the boat has no holes. So just a couple, in my experience, I worked with an 8-figure business, and we saw on CallRail their call answer rate was 98%. Amazing.
Mhm.
But when I spoke to the receptionist and I said, how quickly are you following up with leads? She hesitated and said 15, 20 minutes. And I could tell she wasn't really so confident about that. And I said, what's going on? And she said, well, I don't want to appear creepy. And I told her, well, I totally get that. But Harvard found that the likelihood of a lead moving forward after the 5-minute window that they submitted dropped significantly. And other research, Scott had mentioned, 78% of customers buy from the first company to respond. So that dispels the myth that you need to have a bigger budget than everyone else. You don't. You just need to be hungrier and faster than everyone else.
Mhm.
So this is the 800-pound gorilla no one wants to talk about, which is being quick to respond.
Yeah.
And that's where a customer journey map and getting everyone aligned can do so much more. So that's the first part. Another is having a map decentralizes knowledge.
Mm.
As Scott mentioned earlier, the E-Myth, whether you want to build your business to sell it or not, continue running it, or if you want to take a vacation or you want to give it to your kids, your family, a lot of knowledge in a business is up here. And the problem is people forget things, people come and go. And so a map with SOPs and checklists, the map is, think of it like a high level overview, and then you can have different layers within it, SOPs, checklists, et cetera, et cetera. But if the knowledge is decentralized, then the value of the business already goes up. The business becomes more stable and durable over time. And it gives you more peace of mind as a business owner, because you now know that if someone has to call out sick, that while they're important, they're not crucial to keeping the machine running.
Mhm.
Yep, and something too, like, as Liz is pointing out, this map. I mean, we're talking here about literally a diagram that it's high level. So it's not every SOP and every step of the process, but it's the map. And if you drill this every single week into your whole team, in your weekly staff meeting, however you communicate with your whole team, now everybody knows where you're using the same language. Whatever you want to call it, a lead, a pre-prospect, the prospect, the customer, waiting for signature, waiting for payment, waiting for excavation, waiting for shell delivery, whatever those things are in that process. When that person calls in, if you've got a shared CRM and a shared knowledge base I can look that customer up, that person who answers the phone or is responding to the email can go reference that customer. And if that customer is calling because they're upset about something, they can go, oh, I see you're waiting for the delivery of the shell to your property. You don't get to that stage until we've already dug the hole, and everybody knows that. So they can say, and you know what, I'm so sorry. I know your backyard is a mess right now, but the shell is on its way. I know it's here. I can get you details about when it's going to be shipped and go from there. But that implied knowledge, because one of the things that I remember, quick long history of the Get Smart Group. Allie and I built a automated follow-up system to help Allie sell hot tubs and swim spas 15 years ago, which is how we fell backwards into this business, right? And Allie was able to manage thousands of leads on her own because she had a CRM that would allow her to see where every single person in the process was. And when someone would read an email or they would download a brochure and they were a 6-month-old prospect, that prospect has never finished the conversation with you, the salesperson, right? They pick up the phone and they are right at the last word they said to you the last time you hung up the phone. You have had 500 other phone calls in that time frame. In some cases, you don't even remember who this person is. You quickly go back and look at your notes, and when you answer the phone, oh, hi, Lewis, I see you just downloaded our fiberglass shell brochure. What questions do you have? And you slip right back into that conversation as though no gap ever happened, even though you, again, may not have any recollection of who this person was. And with everybody on your team knowing where they are on that customer journey, from first point of contact through literally opening the pool and they jump in, is a really big deal.
Yeah, so you jumped ahead and skipped my question, but that's awesome because you guys are on the same page. Um, I just wanted to circle back to, with the idea of loyalty begins at the first step, is just getting the loyalty factor is based on trust and consistency. If the customer feels like they can trust you, if they feel like you're going to be a good guide, if your follow-up conveys that to them, and every time they call your store with another question, they get that same consistency in the process, that's where the loyalty starts getting built. So the CRM is the next part of that because it helps support the team and gets the communication available to everybody who touches them. So let's talk a little bit more about how the CRM can help you as a guide and help impact the customer's journey positively. Lewis, let's throw it over to you there. Give me your best thoughts on CRM and why you have to have one.
Absolutely. So CRMs are a powerful tool to empower your sales team to close more deals.
Mm.
It gives you the insight you need to know what's working, what's not working, so that you can ultimately identify the bottlenecks and remove them so that you're spending less time on customers that aren't a good fit, that aren't going to close, and more time on the ones that you want more of.
Mm-hmm.
So without a CRM, it's just going to be very tough. The reality is a spreadsheet maybe can work if you're a very small business, but if you want to grow and have a good foundation in place, having a CRM is a must have.
Oh, go
How I
ahead.
look at it as a CRM is a CRM has to be aligned with the customer journey map, because if it uses the same language, then they're going to be a reflection of each other. A CRM is the tool to manage it, and then the map is a flow chart, a diagram that shows it. So they work very well together. And I recommend for most businesses to start with a simple, lightweight CRM so they can get started, because progress is better than perfection. Don't wait for HubSpot or something very complex where you need to hire a specialist, a consultant out of the gate. Start with something easy so that you can get familiar with it, train your team, and look at the CRM as an ally to help support you.
Yeah, that is something that I have seen so many times in businesses when I've gone to train people on using a CRM for the first time. And often it's been a salesperson that's traditionally been on pen and paper. Well, you can't see my paper because of my background, but I have a pad of paper here. And they either were averse to technology because they felt like it would allow people to spy on them or see how many, phone calls they were making. And yes, we do want to see how many phone calls our salespeople are making. But it also was just something that was a little bit scary to them technologically because they haven't used one before. And so getting them to understand that it makes you a superhero. It doesn't take away from who you are, your relatability. It doesn't take anything away. It lets you be more of who you are consistently so that you can follow up with people and ensure the quality of their journey in the way you want to as a salesperson, and you will get more customers and you will keep those customers happier without even having to copy paste that email 70,000 times to every new lead who comes in. So once people see how it can empower them to have more time to follow up with new incoming leads, and it continues the process of following up with the leads that are already in the funnel, then they had a light bulb moment and they really embraced the power of it and were able to master the basics really quickly because they agreed that it was going to help them make more money. So it's just a matter of education and, like you said, start with something simple. So I'm curious, Lewis, what would you suggest as a simple CRM solution to someone who's just starting with dabbling their toes in that area?
Great question. It depends on your budget. I advise against HubSpot and Salesforce initially. Um, Monday.com or ActiveCampaign are good choices. If I were to pick one out of the two, I would highly consider ActiveCampaign. The reason being is it also lets you be able to email customers and prospects through it.
Hmm.
It's lightweight enough where you can get started with it without having to bring in an ActiveCampaign specialist, but powerful enough where you can have automated emails that work for you 24/7, 365.
Hmm. Okay. And
And once
that's
you
a
get
pretty
comfortable,
key component.
absolutely. So ActiveCampaign gives you a trial. I recommend giving it a test drive, seeing how you like it. And if you do, keep keep it. And if you don't, there's plenty of others out there beyond ActiveCampaign that may be a good fit for you.
Yeah. And Scott, what about you? What would be your go-to CRM systems?
Yeah, so let me first off, Salesforce and NetSuite are the absolute wrong solution for the pool and spa industry at the dealer level. Full stop. Don't
At the
consider them.
dealer
At
level.
the dealer level. They
Okay.
might make sense at the manufacturer level in some cases, but in the past 2 years, we have seen both of those companies aggressively attempt to expand into the pool and spa industry, and we have seen some of the folks in this industry literally spend more than $1 million configuring a custom NetSuite or Salesforce app for themselves, which, to put it mildly, is overkill, and like almost like business malpractice. I mean, at that point, it's just too much money. That being said, real quick, what's in a CRM? Well, it's the full history of your lead, right? In the world of sales, the second best thing to a yes is a no, because that way you stop spending time on that person and you spend time on people who are actually going to potentially give you money, right? CRMs, you track that process the entire time. And then backing up for a second to the original topic of this webinar, the customer journey,
Yeah.
most people take 2 or 3 years at a minimum to make a final decision to buy a pool, and 1 to 2 years at a minimum to make a final decision to buy a hot tub. If you're able to capture those leads 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years before they make the purchase, you've made a lot more money. You've made the cost of your leads and the cost of your customers significantly lower over time. So 2 things: CRM is going to keep track of every lead that comes in and every interaction, every phone call, every email that your salesperson has to log. And then the second key point that Lewis mentioned is the automation. And that's, again, literally what put Ali and my, as a company, as the Get Smart Group, on the map 16 years ago, was building an automation system to help people through that customer journey of spending a bunch of money on a hot tub or a swim spa. And so those 2 things, when you look at it, and we've tried them all. I will echo Lewis's comment about ActiveCampaign. I think they're the best kind of entry to mid-level CRM out there. They do have a good free trial, but you do have to put some work into it. But again, to what Lewis has said, progress is what matters more. Just little by little. We built our first 3 follow-up emails. We wrote our first script and our first customer map this quarter. Take a breath. Now, next quarter, what are we going to do? What are the next 3 emails they're going to get? What are the next 10 emails they're going to get? What brochure am I going to send that customer? How does that automation work? And you can take so much of that automation pathway from your map, from your salespeople. What do people typically request? When do they request it? What do they wish they knew before they talk to you? Just email all those things to your leads and to your prospects that are out there, right? And then, secondarily, again, budget is obviously a concern. We are very, very happy with HubSpot, but it is not an entry-level CRM. HubSpot salespeople will tell you that. They're lying. And I've told them that to their face, and they don't like me saying that, but it's true. But the product is very, very good. But kind of a trailing point here, the business owner has to understand what it's doing. The sales manager and the business owner has to understand what a CRM is doing for their business to continue to justify the cost. And we have seen so many businesses spend 2 or 3 years with a CRM that's working but not great, and it's because of lack of management and ownership buy-in. The salespeople start to complain that they're tired of logging their phone calls and they're tired of logging their emails. Guess what? That's the price of doing business in a well-run business. And if you do those things and you stay on top of it, the value far exceeds what you pay for it. in any CRM platform out there. So yeah, ActiveCampaign is a good starting point. And then HubSpot for sure.
So I want to talk now a little bit about a phrase that you said last week that cracked me up, Lewis, which was random acts of marketing. I think I laughed out loud when you said that because I haven't heard that, but I've seen it a lot. So let's compare a CRM that's aligned with the mapped out customer journey versus random acts of marketing. What does that look like, and what's going to happen in those scenarios there?
Yeah. So with random acts of marketing, it's really shooting by the hip, being a gunslinger, which sounds great, but it doesn't get you to where you want to be. Don't get me wrong, some of marketing involves intuition, but intuition without having a system in place, alignment, making decisions based upon data, it's not going to get you consistent results.
Mhm.
So let's contrast random acts of marketing, which is kind of taking it day by day and starting campaigns and stopping them and not having a real intention, method behind it, with a CRM that is aligned with a customer journey map. The customer journey map is front and center. Everyone in the company uses CRM because that's the way we do things. What campaigns we're going to focus on every quarter is prioritized.
Mm,
We create constraints not to starve ourselves, but because constraints create focus.
yeah. You called it whack-a-mole versus a systemic approach. And
Yes.
I like that because, you can be driving on the highway and decide to like suddenly I'm going to put my ad on a billboard. And yet if you don't know what you're going to put on that billboard that's actually going to resonate with people and resonate with the brand that you have and resonate with the products you're trying to sell, the way you're trying to sell them, it's a waste of money. Yeah, sure, your logo might be on there and there might be a picture of a pool or a hot tub or whatever you're selling, but if you haven't thought about what part of the journey that billboard plays in your marketing, it won't resonate the way it needs to. So,
Right.
um,
You've got
you
to be
know,
able to measure all this stuff at every
yeah,
step of the way.
yeah,
And, there's the old line of, it took me 10 years of hard work to become an overnight success, right? Is that when you take that approach, a lot of times you don't know what piece did it, what was the last thing, but that, past footprint, that past effort goes a long way into making a business successful in the long term. But when it comes to that whack-a-mole approach to marketing, again, it's something we see all the time. Well, this isn't working. Switch, try this offer instead. It's
mhm,
been like 2 days, man. Like less than 2% of your audience haven't even seen this offer. So we have no way to know if it's going to run as far as the marketing effort goes.
Another thing that doesn't get talked enough about is that 95% of your potential customers aren't ready to buy. Scott mentioned earlier about the 1 to 2 to 3, even maybe 4 year cycle. There's something called the 95-5 rule. Marketing scientists discovered that only 5% of potential buyers are ready now. So, what does that mean? You can only do so much to the 5% that is ready to buy now. So, the focus is to not overplay your hand with them, but to focus on the 95 that will drive future revenue. And
yes,
that's where taking a longer time horizon is important. So, how do you do that? What we've mentioned today, mapping the customer journey, having a CRM, and embracing the fact that fortune is made in the follow up.
yes. Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly where I was going next. And we talked a little bit about the retail side of the customer journey because you're not just mapping the journey of the sales process, you're actually in some instances mapping out your showroom with the journey you want your customer to have when they walk in. And what do they see first? What order are things displayed? Is it the cheapest hot tub first? Is it the most expensive hot tub first? How are the pool chemicals and water care products laid out? Where are the accessories? How do we get them to the back of the store where the most expensive things are? Well, we have to put something back there that they're going to want to go back there for. So there's not just the map of the journey theoretically, there's the actual retail showroom map and the experience they get there. So, Scott, can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, so I mean, retail layout is a whole nother whole nother conversation on top of this one, and there's a lot of science to it and a lot of I wouldn't even call it theory. There's a lot of very proven science as to how you lay out a store, and it's why grocery stores are laid out the way they are and department stores are laid out the way they are. They want you to, for the easy stuff you're going after. It's why the produce and the meat and the dairy is in the back of Costco, right? Because that's what most people are coming in for, but they want you to see everything else as you go through the store. So understanding that process of what they're going to look at and how do you want to present yourself. I mean, obviously a good, clean, well lit, well thought out showroom is very, very important, but it's going to come down to the individual mix of what your products are to give, specific advice there. However, I do want to address one more thing because I know we're getting close to the hour here. Talking about this customer journey, and this actually does apply to the retail space, is unconventional ways to get a customer. And one of the more common, I'll say, complaints that we hear from our customers who have retail and who have a water care desk, people will come up or they'll call on the phone and they will monopolize an employee's time for half an hour because their pool is green or their chemistry is off or what have you. And they give them all this advice and they say, thanks. And they hang up and they go to Walmart and they buy the water care products. And then it doesn't work because those products are inferior and they call you back and they take up all your time. You don't get any money from these people. So, and same thing in a retail store. People will come in and do the water test and it'll say, add so much of this, so much of this, so much of this. And then they hightail it out to wherever and they buy something that they consider to be a cheaper water care alternative. When again, it's not going to work and they're going to keep coming back from a water care. But that business is spending money to get that customer. So what you do is you create a water care guide that you offer to email people, right? Oh my gosh, all of these questions are answered in our water care guide. What's your email address, right? Let me email it to you because can you see we're busy? And now you've got them, and now you can add them to that CRM and that automation and get them into the business. So there's a lot of ways to capture that lead in that customer journey process, whether or not it's in the retail space. Oh, I'm just looking. Well, can I email you a brochure? Can I email you brochures about our saunas? Sure. And then I won't talk to you again. I promise. I'll just email it to you, right? All those little ways of getting someone to part with their contact information adds them to your customer journey and makes them a more likely prospect down the road.
And coming back to loyalty again, making sure that the retail experience for the customer is consistent to their expected experience that you promised with your marketing, you promised with the quality of your follow-up. When they walk into your store after they've had great conversations and you've been really prompt, and they find a sticky floor, burned out lights, dusty shelves, cobwebs on pool supplies, et cetera, that is not going to give them a warm, tingly feeling about working with you to install a pool in their backyard because that speaks to something going on that is inconsistent and it's jarring for them. So making sure that the consistency that you've promised is there in the retail experience for the customer is also critical to keeping that trust, keeping that loyalty, and winning that business and getting them to come back time and again thereafter because they're not just a customer the first time. If you do it right, they're a customer more than once and not maybe not with another pool, but with other products, with other supplies. Let's touch very briefly on the customer journey after they've purchased, Lewis, because you had some great examples of what it could look like after the purchase is made and how a CRM can continue to build value in that customer thereafter.
Yeah. So one example that comes to mind is an anniversary email. So let's say they get their pool completely finished and it's ready on July 1st, just in time for Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
A quick, easy thing to add is an anniversary email every July 1st. that they get, reminding them of that. And what that does is it's a small thing, but it triggers a positive memory.
Mm,
And that in itself, you set it up once and it works forever. And that can mean the difference between no referrals from that person and them sending you several over many years.
yeah, that's a great example. And ask for reviews. Ask for pictures. How's the backyard looking now? Are those plants grown out? Would you like to refer us customers? We'll give you some rewards credit here at the store you can use towards your supplies this season. There's a lot of value there in that customer follow-up after they've purchased from you. That if you're not using a CRM to keep track of when that person became a customer, you're going to miss out on the opportunities to upsell, cross-sell, get those referrals, get those reviews, and you're going to have to do everything manually. And it's a lot harder, and the value of that customer is going to decrease over time. So, as we're wrapping up here, and I know we have a million more things on
Yeah, I was
this
gonna say I could go for another hour, but
that
I think we're boring some people at this point.
yeah, but we'll come back to this series, and maybe what we'll do is we'll ask people to submit their questions, and then we'll address the specific questions they have about the customer journey, and we'll touch on some more aspects of that we didn't get to today. But the most important takeaway that you think people should be aware of for how to or why they should have their customer journey mapped out. Lewis, go.
I would recommend getting a first draft out, whether it's on paper, a whiteboard, wherever, because seeing it on paper is progress. It gives you something tangible to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So just get started and then continue to refine it and work on it as often as you can. That's the biggest takeaway I would leave you with is that.
About you, Scott?
Um, when it comes to that's great on the overall customer map piece. I want to slice this down a little bit further into the automation piece of follow up. When we first create the automation follow up campaign, and automation for the most part means email, salesperson phone call, email, salesperson phone call. Is what does that path look like? That's going to fire off an email to a customer, to a lead or a prospect automatically to keep them engaged, right? We always start with what we call the zero reply assumption. And that means because what happens is you start to map this out and like, well, what if they do this? What if they fill out this form? Well, what if they indicate they're only interested in this? Well, then how does it branch? How do we communicate from there? And it turns into this can of worms and everybody stops working right there. So start with the zero reply assumption, because in most businesses, that is most of the leads that come into your business out of the gate. It's people who never reply. They wanted information, they got it, and now they're thinking about it, they're discussing it, what have you. You're never going to know what's going on behind that curtain. So what would you send somebody if you knew they wanted a pool? You knew it, but they never called you back and they never replied to your email. What would you keep sending them? And now this can be a little depressing at first as a salesperson. You're like, well, why would I do that? Because they're never going to call me back. They will eventually, I promise. But if you don't start with that baseline, you'll never get to the, okay, they replied, okay, they've come in for a visit, okay, we've been to their site. You'll never get to those next pieces until you map out that baseline response. And eventually they'll come around. But the beauty is, if that one lead doesn't, and the second lead doesn't, and the third lead doesn't, every lead from that point forward will get that same process of emails. And you only have to do it once, and you've leveraged your time 100, 1,000, 10,000 times. So it can be painful at first, but it's worth it because you don't have to do it again until you update your product line. But it's a big deal from leveraging your time perspective.
Yeah. And I just want to talk a little bit about, for me, one of the biggest takeaways is an understanding that as a business owner, you have to do the work internally yourself first in order to be able to map the journey that you want your customer to have. You have to have the processes, you have to have the SOPs, you have to have an understanding of what your staff is capable of delivering. and put those resources in place and the training your team needs to even be able to achieve the journey that you want to create for your customers. So it starts at the top, and you need those for yourself for all of your business practices before you can really deliver what you want to deliver. So we're going to come back to this topic. There's so much richness here. I thank you both. Lewis, tell us where people can find you if they want to reach out.
Yeah, we're going to share the link to get in contact with me with this webinar. So feel free to reach out and happy to connect.
Yep, same with us at theGetSmartGroup.com. You guys can click on the link. We're going to solicit some questions from you for the next time we cover this topic. And thanks for listening. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.